Now we get to the member-specific segment. Alfred's going to talk to us about improving our gaming. Talk to me, Alfred. Talk to me. I need some improvement.
No, I mean, I appreciate that, Tom, but part of the reason why I bring up this subject is because I have realized over time that in our gaming group, and I take this on with a certain amount of adoration, I have been a perennial loser. Not in a bad fashion, not in the oh, woe is me. I love the fact that, again, Maddie and yourself have been so kind to invite me into the kind of room to play and to kind of explore these many games that I'm usually not getting too many reps on. So yeah. I'm not blaming that situation. I do think, though, it's my specific background, and I think this is something that you have some allyship with. I come from a place of RPG.
Yep.
And in RPGs, generally speaking, the more artfully you fell on your sword, the more beautiful the gaming experience was.
100%.
And that isn't to say that the quirks or the losses of a battle would define your character. It was much more just how you could kind of group tell that story, and oftentimes that involves a certain amount of faltering and come or succeed potentially.
Well, yeah, and
in board gaming there is. Yeah.
I was just going to say, let's say that not everyone plays RPGs that way. You and I play RPGs that way, and I think that's a fairly elevated way to look at it. Some people do play RPGs very much as a winning and losing thing.
But then usually, I mean, I would imagine there would be some amount of correction. And versus board game space, you've all decided together that by playing and really striving to play your best game, you are attempting to win. No slight to anyone in their kind of camaraderie aspect. I think that's beautiful.
Sure.
But if you were not playing to win, you were not necessarily playing your best game or allowing other people to play their best game.
Right.
And so when I first got involved in the board game space, I was a little bit confused about some of the nomenclature, but just the way to bring out my best and therefore bring others' best out. And I was really taught by this board game group what it meant to be not only a good winner and a good loser in the board game world, but also how to really start to play at a level that made it so that I hope I was a valuable member of the community, a valuable person to have on the board, right?
Incredibly valuable. Dude, we still mourn you. We still mourn your passing into the East Coast.
Oh, that's very, very kind. And I adore the fact that I really that this kind of excellence was not just out of the board games themselves and the rules, but also you all and the play styles that you bring. And it really is very not just coming down to like a single name value that, everybody has their kind of nicknames in the board game group, but really a lot of real beautiful insights have been given to me. And I just want to see if by like kind of recounting that to you a little bit and to our listeners, maybe in some small regard, they can improve their game and kind of bring out their best in that regard.
I think that is magnanimous. I think it is wonderful. Let's jump in. I think that's fantastic. Let's get going.
Awesome. One of the most overwhelming things about board game that that have been imparted about modern board gaming is this idea that there are a lot of rules and they're complicated. I mean, it sounds like such a reduction of board game space, but I think that alone, when I first got playing on what would be heavy Euros, like what would Board Game Geek would really give the top marks to in terms of weight, there was a certain aspect of obfuscation of the actual goals involved. And so one of the things that I've really gotten from you, Tom, specifically was situational awareness. Do you have a definition of situational awareness in terms of board games?
In terms of board games, I would say this. I would say that the first time you play a heavy and complicated game, you are staring down at your board. You're staring at your pieces, you're staring at what you are doing, and you're trying to figure out, how do I do this game, period. And then as you get better at the game, as you play it more, some people never quite leave that. They're still just looking at what they are doing at the board. Situational awareness, however, is when you can lift your head up and you can start paying attention to what everyone else is doing. You can start paying attention to the board state, not as it relates directly to you, but as it exists as a whole in a more holistic way. And if you can do that, you can start to have more success at games, and you can start to appreciate games on a deeper level, because suddenly I'm looking at Dimitri. What does Dimitri need to do? Or more importantly, Dimitri needs to do A, but I know Dimitri, and he's not going to do A. He's going to take the first player token next.
I mean, that is the bigger situational awareness, right? That is
Sure.
the cosmic mind situational awareness, when you can really know the gaming styles of those you are involved in and also know the game well enough to see how it might play out. I will also say, and I'll add to that, this kind of thing of taking a pause in a moment before the game starts and really appreciating the game you are playing at that moment. Because I think for many of our listeners out there, and ourselves very much included, we play so many different games. It's easy to kind of get into a gyre of game space where you think you know the game you're playing before you play it. Maybe you've played it many times, but the players you are playing it with are different, the kind of styles to which you will be offered. And so to take that breath, that moment, that beat, to really appreciate both yourself in the game space, to kind of take full account for those other people, like you mentioned, but then equally really look at the board, like really see what's actually happening rather than what you've seen happen before. Especially if you're in a big, long game day playing multiple games, it makes the hugest difference.
Totally agree. I think you in poker, they say that the poor poker player plays his cards, the great poker player plays the people, right? And I think there's a corollary in board gaming. When you start playing the people and not just the game in front of you, I think, A, you're going to have better results and you're going to play a better game. But I also think what you just said is the most important part of it. You're going to have a greater appreciation of everything because you're not just appreciating a game, not just appreciating a mechanism, not just appreciating a move that you made, but you're appreciating an experience, a shared experience. You're appreciating people.
And the storytelling oftentimes actually happens out of the play rather than the specific moves you're making or the kind of unfurling of your perfect engine. It really is the interplay. So that's why Avalon always shows up in our stories, right? That's why we appreciate a lot of 18XX when a certain dagger was placed in someone's back at a critical moment, because you can kind of get beyond the small moves and you can look at the larger gameplay. And in essence, that's just going to be the more fun thing. But it really does take having a sense of where the joke is, right? If the punchline hasn't been set up properly, you'll never appreciate the joke. So in a much different metaphor, it's the same way with games.
Totally.
And and then it's also worthwhile, and this is kind of metagame style, but if you can be away from your phone, and I terribly have issues with this for a variety of reasons. If you can be a little bit aside from your phone, a little aside from distractions, if you can make sure that you are fed and you're hydrated in these things, you can be present more for the fun of it.
100%. Listen, I have picked on you many times for being the person that's on his phone. I've said famously at one game event, everybody, on the count of three, say who's the person that is always on their phone and not paying attention to the game. 1, 2, 3, everyone yells at Alfred. So there's a little bit of shaming in that. I want to back that up and apologize because I do, while I kind of said that to A, make a joke at somebody's expense, which is I'm not proud of, but also B, to sort of get you back into the moment. I also realize that you have a business and you are checking those emails some of the time because you have a recording studio and you need to sometimes run and let people in and all that sort of stuff. We all have a life outside of games, and your life just happens to be something that occasionally is going to happen during game night. Whereas me and some of the other writers, we can much better compartmentalize things and generally aren't interrupted when when we don't want to be.
Well, especially in a past life, my livelihood did happen in evenings, generally speaking, rather than daytimes. And so it was a funny inversion where oftentimes during the day I'm twiddling my fingers, of course, getting some things done. And then in the evenings, my work would begin. And it's just nice to have the break of having game night. Doesn't mean that the work is paused.
Sure.
I mean, that's just part of the musician's kind of dilemma. But that being said, now life is very different. Board gaming is a respite. And you have made me a better gamer by that shaming. Now, not to say that I've always taken that lesson on the chin properly, but it is the case that I have become a much better gamer because of a little bit more of that situational awareness that I really do feel imparted by you and others in the group. I'm going to continue this list, though, because I just want to make sure I bring up some of these ideas.
Oh, please,
in the same kind of idea of situational awareness, I would really like to focus in on the kind of strategic versus tactical play. there are many games where you may think going into it that you have a plan. There is a shiny thing that you want to do, a game mechanic or a mechanism that is really interesting to kind of like, oh, I really want to explore. Say you're playing Caverna and you really want to play a questing band, but something in the game changes, and you are either going to play that tactically or you are going to be stuck in a certain. So I'm not talking about the game itself, where if it's a strategic or tactical game, because those are kind of obvious clues and evident, but to be supple enough in your game style that you are willing to make a switch and that you have a sense already, be a few moves ahead of things, that you can make a really important shift in your game before you start having no fun, before your fun decision space gets really small, because you might have picked badly or been led astray by a game that seemed to have a shiny thing that just wasn't an actual winning play style.
Yeah, no, I could not agree more. It's one of those things. The hardest thing to do is to switch horses midstream in a game, but sometimes that's the answer. And if you can learn to start to recognize that, and to get yourself out of that only one way to play. I started this way, I must finish this way. Oh boy, depending on the game, some games really, really reward that. Weirdly, Mahjong is this bizarre game where you have such a limited decision space. But when I see the first tiles people are throwing out into the center, it tells me a lot about what they don't value. And when I'm looking at the tiles I have in front of me, I could be, 70% leaning towards going towards strategy A, but based on just the first first 8 tiles that are thrown out in the game, and there's 150 some odd tiles in a game of this, I could, if I'm playing well, I'm going to make a decision to not do that thing that my board is set up to do. Rather, I'm going to go the other way, because that other strategy that I could possibly have the startings of here are using the tiles that nobody already has indicated that they want. And that is going to mean that it's going to have a better chance of me getting them. So, and that happens in our board games all the time. All the time, there are 3 people that are pursuing strategy A, because strategy A we know is a very good strategy. But when 3 people are pursuing it, guess who's going to win? The person on strategy B, C, or D, right?
And part of that goes into this idea of esteeming your kind of fellow gamers enough that you can both assess the actual play, but then, depending on your board game group, ask questions of the group. This happens all the time amongst us. And I think there's been moments in the past where, it can sound a little bit like sniveling. It can sound a little bit like moaning. Of course, that has its own board game presence, that has its own board game ideas, their own meta.
Sure.
But I think it's very much worth sometimes asking somebody's intentions, asking where the game is going. And this can be rhetorical. This can be very genuine. And some games encourage it. Some games discourage it. It's always good to pay attention to the actual rules and what they allow. But being vocal with your group, you are going to have more fun. And oftentimes people may not give you the straight answer, they may not give you, but you are still much more effectively playing the game by being inquisitive of the game space. And so again, sometimes that's with a verbal cue, and sometimes that's just looking properly at the board, but ask questions of your space. And again, the answers you may receive might be even more things to chew on in terms of what is actually the game at play versus what you are perceiving, because we can be very myopic, right? We can kind of see something and we think we're
Sure.
right, but we might very vastly miss the actual implications of our moves.
Sure, of course. Though, I mean, do you perceive yourself as not being a person that sort of asks people what's your intention? Because that's not my perception of you. My perception of you is you are fairly gregarious in that sense, and you are inquisitive and ask around a little bit.
I feel very comfortable now to do that with y'all, but I think with other gamers, I can be really tight-lipped and a little bit shy. And so you've really much brought me out of my shell, but I know it's something, but the thing I'm the most guilty of, and one of the reasons I even brought this up, is because I can very much fall for, this looks fun, I'm going to do this thing, whether or not I win or lose.
Well,
and especially games like Clans of Caledonia, and some of these games where there is some asymmetry where you can kind of play your own game. At the end of it, you're just like, I didn't get points. Why didn't I get points? Well, I wasn't really playing the game at hand. And it's just important. I mean, it's important to find your fun in everything.
Sure.
But I know if I can be a better adversary, people will bring out their best.
I agree with that. Yeah. I mean, listen, let's separate the first couple times you play a game and when you've played it 3 or 4 times. hopefully we're moving from that exploration into a more nuanced understanding of the game. But I do love the first couple plays of a game when I don't know what's going to do well, and I do explore something, and I'm like, wow, I'm trying to remember what game it was, but there was a game fairly recently, I think this year, or at the beginning of the year before we went into quarantine, that I played that I was like, I did so many things in that game and I got almost 0 points.
And no, I'm not saying, and I'm not trying to shame that at all. Exploring the space is a huge part of understanding a game. Doing the reps is a huge thing. But let's assume that we're taking a game that is a classic, something we know inside and out. And even then we can fall sway either of our I'm thinking about Paul and Le Havre, right? Like he takes fish. Now, of course, this is a stereotype. This is not something that actually happens every game, but it is such a thing that when he does do it, eventually it becomes like a little bit of our inside joke. But that being said, it's like, there's an aspect to which he's making decisions partially out of muscle memory more than maybe than the game would always dictate. And equally, I have the same things that happen. Just sometimes things are they occupy my headspace about a game, whether or not it's right or wrong, or especially whether or not it's right for that particular game at a time.
Totally. I think that's really, really valid. And if you can start to do that, especially the getting out of your headspace and talking to people about what they're doing in the game. That's like a poker player that is fishing for tells. That's it's you're no longer just playing the game, you're playing the people as well. And in the right crowd, and a lot of board gaming crowds are the right crowd for this. That they're either going to talk to you or they won't. And when they do, you're more likely to make memories in that situation, right?
Well, totally. And then my final point amongst these, and I think it's one of those very practicable things, even though it's very objective, is the kind of getting your emotions involved. I am very guilty of this in terms of I feel very swayed. Gaming is a very personal act to me. It's very exposed in some ways. It's something I really feel my brain needs. I mean, I think everyone in this group has this kind of idea. And we all risk a certain amount emotionally being exposed to each other. But at times, there will be, almost in every game, there will be a moment where you are grasping at the victory or you are feeling like you're already the loser. You've already thrown it away. And of course, this is not always indicative of the actual game at play. It's part of the game to risk something, to endanger something. But when you use this effectively, you are involved. It's happening. Yes. When you're using this ineffectively, you let these large sounding emotions mute what is the other kinds of form of play or compersion, right? Like finding joy in other people's successes, other people's explorations. Yes. And it's really good to be able to balance this and not only assert, okay, this is just a game. To play a game effectively, you have to risk something. You have to be involved. But to kind of really understand the space of the game, to kind of play the meta properly, to really see the other player and really kind of find the joy and the love in this kind of shared kinship, no matter if it's online or in person, is a huge skill that we can all work on, right? This is it's not just the snivel when used effectively. It's not just the kind of patting someone on the back and a good victory. It's just, you've done a great job. Everyone can feel really proud of the situation. You all walk away from a game night that can go on for many, many hours feeling like it's been the best possible.
Yeah. I can't wait to play this back to you the next time we play Avalon. That's absolutely wonderful.
No, Avalon, all the bets are off. It's not even it's barely a board game, right? It's just you're looking at each other across a board game, thinking and calling each other liars. I mean, that's what I don't even know what that is, but
it is Vicini's game of wits in Princess Bride. That's what it is.
But it poisons in every cup. That's all I know.
Oh, Alfred, you have such an amazing spirit. There is something about you that we like to think that our game group is very diverse in several different aspects, but we lost something when you went away, and we will never find something quite like that again. So we are very happy every chance we get to play with you virtually. You are a true joy.
Oh, that's very kind of you, Tom, and I miss you all as well. And I'm very happy that even despite the very, very tough moments we're in and the huge societal upswing and change, that we can still find evenings, afternoons, mornings at times, and make these memories together. It's beautiful.
100%. Yeah. I've been finding myself. I'm not a person easily depressed, but given all that is happening in the world, I've been feeling, for a little while now, a little down. And every time I get together virtually and play games with my friends, I feel like a weight is being lifted off of me. It is maybe not making a difference in the larger world, but in my small world of my community, it is very much lifting my spirits, and I'm tremendously thankful for it.
I would just offer you, though, if you can make a small change in your life, especially if it has the essence of a permanent change, you are making a change in the larger world, especially as you, as a kind of a leader that you are, if you're echoing that further and outward,
Yeah.
it's going to change the space. And I think board gaming is a huge example of, like you did with that episode with your kids.
Yeah.
You're teaching these lifelong lessons about how to be a good winner, how to be a good loser, what equity is, what fairness can be. There's huge implications for these ideas, especially in the larger dialogue about community. And I'm excited to see that more take center stage in the board game space.
Thanks for saying that, Alfred. I think that's really true and a beautiful sentiment. Do you think you can hang on for 1 second so we could do one board game sommelier?
Yeah, we need to. I've been missing the board game sommelier.
Done.
I absolutely adore our community, and the call-in episode was so special to me. I really hope that call-in episode can happen once every turn, once every round, as often as possible, because I loved the kind of the way that people were able to interact with you and Maddie, and I just want to see more of that community action. I mean, hey, the Discord is full of some of the question space, but or the Facebook group and things, but increasingly just hearing voices from the variety of places was really special.
Well, I know that Maddie and I had a really great time doing that episode, and I'm sure we very much look forward to doing it again soon.
Hey, if you enjoyed that video, you very well might enjoy the other videos you now see being suggested to you on screen. Also, we'd greatly appreciate it if you could like, share, or subscribe to our Game Brain channel. Thanks so much.